Okay, guys, going to have a go at explaining this power sharing thing to you. So, power sharing was an attempt by this man, Ted Heath, the British Prime Minister, to bring a Northern Ireland government back into being in 1973, 1974. You'll remember that Stormont had collapsed in 1972. The unionist system had gone, and now they're attempting to bring back government to Northern Ireland based on power sharing, where nationalists and unionists would share power. Now, this idea was immediately unpopular with many loyalists. Ian Paisley opposed it. Bill Craig opposed it, the leader of Vanguard. And some members of Faulkner's own Unionist Party opposed it as well. And indeed, the Loyalists and the UDA and the UVF set up a joint Ulster Army Council to oppose power sharing. They were opposed it because they believed that with Protestants and Unionists being in the majority in Northern Ireland, that they deserved or should run Northern Ireland. That was what democracy meant to them. They didn't believe in sharing power with traitors or enemies, if you like, of Ulster. So for this power sharing to work, first of all, there had to be elections for Stormont. Here we have Stormont here, and the elections were bad for power sharing because in the elections, the Unionists, although the Unionists got most seats, 26 of the Unionist seats were anti-power sharing, and only 24 were pro-power sharing. Okay, so there's 26 anti-power sharing Unionists elected and 24 pro-power sharing Unionists elected. So therefore, that's a bad sign for power sharing from the very, very beginning. However, these two guys decided to go ahead with power sharing. This is Gerry Fitt and Brian Faulkner. Brian Faulkner and Gerry Fitt, the wrong way around. Brian Faulkner, the head of the Unionist Party. Obviously, most Unionists aren't behind him. However, he and Gerry Fitt decide to try and work together. And they go to Sunningdale in England, where they have to iron out how power sharing will work. Now, at Sunningdale, it was agreed that there would only be United Ireland if the majority in Northern Ireland wanted it. The idea of that was to keep Unionists happy and to allay Unionist fears that maybe this was a step towards a United Ireland. And for nationalists, there was a promise of a Council of Ireland would be set up between Northern Ireland and the Republic, and that was called the Irish Dimension, and that would involve politicians from the north and south joining together to talk about things of common interest like fishery and so on. Now, it's interesting that both the IRA and the UDA rejected Sunningdale for their own reasons. That's not really important to us today why they rejected it, but the IRA set off bombs in London just after the Sunningdale Agreement was signed, and the Loyalists set up the Ulster Army Council. Right, so the new power sharing executive was set up in January 1974 with the Unionists, here's Brian Faulkner, and the SDLP, here's Gerry Fitt, working together along with another party called the Alliance Party. But the power sharing executive had problems straight away. First of all, the Unionist Party actually got rid of Faulkner as its leader and replaced him with Harry West. Now, Faulkner is still the leader of the executive, but he's no longer the head of the Ulster Unionist Party. He's been replaced. And that happened just 3 days after this photograph was taken in January 1974. So that's a bad start. However, the power sharing executive decided to continue on, and in May, the pressure on the power sharing executive was ramped up by an event called the Ulster Workers' Council strike. A very, very, very important event, and it's one that you could get a question on in an exam. So on the 15th of May 1974, the Loyalist Ulster Workers' Council began a 2-week strike to try and bring down power sharing. Barricades are erected and manned by paramilitaries. There are electricity blackouts, food shortages, and the army's brought in to keep petrol stations open. So here you see a picture of UDA men manning a barricade. And their idea is to try to bring Northern Ireland to a standstill so that Faulkner resigns and power sharing is defeated and ends. Aside from that, there's a terrorist campaign going on at the time. 3 days into the strike, and 2 bombs go off in Dublin and Monaghan, killing 33 people. These bombs were by the UVF, and this was the single most bloody day of the Troubles, okay, the 17th of May 1974. There were attempts to try and get workers back to work. but they failed. There was a back to work campaign by the trade unions, but only about 200 turned up to the march. Most people felt intimidated by the UDF and UDA. You can see this cartoon here where the man saying, "I don't want to go on strike." But then you see that arm of the UDA come and grabbing him by the throat. And he said, "I'm on strike, I'm on strike." So the significance of this cartoon is it's saying that the people of Ulster didn't really want to go on strike. It was the UDA, these guys here, who were forcing them to go on strike. And obviously when somebody's on strike, they're not earning money and the food's getting short and it's hard to feed their children, and nobody really wants to be on strike, okay? Finally, on the 20th of May, with the country seemingly falling to bits, Brian Faulkner decides that he is going to resign. It's obvious that the unionist community are against him, the loyalist community are against him. Brian Faulkner, Ian Paisley, Bill Craig, Harry West, the Unionist Party, everybody's against him. And so power sharing collapses and direct rule is reimposed. To loyalists, this was a victory and was celebrated in the streets. And we've got a picture here of a crowd of women walking down the Shankill Road. There's a band coming behind them, and on the newspaper they're holding up, it says the executive collapses, and obviously they're very, very happy about this. So that's and the reasons why it collapsed, guys. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful to you all.